to LDM Radio Sports Talk, the show that talks about sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. Joining me this week is my co-host in New Jersey, Rowdy Judd. Rowdy, you there?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Hey, all right. Feeling good, feeling good. So, we're going to start the show with one of the most epic sports and one of the most epic sporting events that happened, especially in the regular season in this decade, which was the Field of Dreams game that was played last Thursday after we were on air. It was a game between the New York Yankees and the Chicago White Sox, and the Chicago White Sox were the home team. The game was played in Iowa, which was 30 minutes set of the Field of Dreams movie from 1989 starring Kevin Costner. And this game, like what was leading up to this game, it was supposed to happen last year for the first time, and it was supposed to be the same two teams, the Yankees and the White Sox. The Yankees ended up getting subbed out for the St. Louis Cardinals when the COVID was ravaging through the entire nation, and then they ended up just skipping the game altogether because it just wasn't safe, and they just didn't have enough. There weren't any fans allowed, and it just didn't seem like the right time to do it. So they saved it for this year, and it was absolutely epic. It was great that they actually saved it for this year, in my opinion. The game was it was played in a mock field from the Field of Dreams movie, and it was absolutely fantastic the way they had the lead in with Kevin Costner come in, and he came in through the cornfield, much like the one of the scenes in the movie, and then both teams ended up coming out simultaneously into the field from the outfield and walked into the infield. It was just a tremendous scene, and it was fantastic, and all the aerial views that they showed throughout the game, and the red sunset. I mean, you just could not paint a more perfect picture for a baseball game. And then the actual game itself, which it had for those of us who follow hockey, it had the NHL Winter Classic feel to it, and I think that this is going to become baseball's version of the Winter Classic. I'm assuming it'll be a yearly thing. It's also going to be next year, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And it was the highest rated baseball game in 16 years. So a lot of eyes were on this one. They had retro jerseys. The White Sox had the old uniforms from the early 1900s, and the Yankees did as well. It was just an absolutely fantastic scene from top to bottom. So the actual game itself was my prevailing thought from seeing the opening and how everything was going was like, oh man, how cool would it be to see a home run get hit in this cornfield? And there's a lot of baseball games that happen that don't have any home runs. This one had a whopping 8 home runs hit throughout the whole game. It was 4 from each side, 4 for the Yankees, 4 for the White Sox. It was a 7-4 game. The White Sox were leading heading into the 9th inning, which looked like an easy win for the Chicago White Sox. But then Aaron Judge hit a 2-run homer. That was his second homer of the game. And Giancarlo Stanton ended up hitting a 2-run home run to give the Yankees an 8-7 lead going into the bottom of the 9th. And then Tim Anderson ended up hitting a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 9th to take the win for the Chicago White Sox. Absolutely fantastic game. I think it was just from a non-biased standpoint, it's exactly the game that you would want for a nationally televised game, for a game of this magnitude. Just thrilling, runs here and there, and like a big comeback, and then it wasn't big enough because then the White Sox had the last straw, and they ended up taking home the win. I think it was an absolutely fantastic game, and I think for a lot of eyes, for so many eyes to be on this game, so you're thinking, you obviously have the White Sox and the Yankees fans, and then you have all the other pure baseball fans that just wanted to see the game. Then you also have your casual fans that were kind of drawn in to the game, and then you have the older fans who actually, remember the Field of Dreams movie itself, and wanted to relive the nostalgia of it, or even if they just thought that Kevin Costner was a super sexy dude and they just wanted to see him again. Whatever the case was, it was a lot of eyes were on it, and it was just a fantastic game. And I think that a lot of what draws in, like on top of your baseball purists, because baseball purists are going to love, any game that happens, and there's always a thrilling story to every game as it unfolds, whether it be a pitching duel or a run fest like this one was. And I think that, for the light casual fans, and then the, like the kind of new fans to the game, everybody loves offense, and offense is what makes everything more exciting, and it makes it more fun. And I think that was the perfect textbook storyline and then closing that could have happened in this game, and it was just absolutely fantastic. Judd, do you have any thoughts on the Field of Dreams game?
Yeah, I mean, I think comparing it to the Winter Classic is very spot on. I know a lot of people took issue with the concept of the outdoor game in the NHL because they just became super frequent. But I think it's always cool to have like those sort of marquee games because, as you said, it attracts people who don't necessarily watch the sport or who don't necessarily watch those two teams, and it gives them an excuse to watch a special game. So I'm all for finding different ways to bring new people into the sport.
Absolutely, 100%. I've preached it many, many times on the show itself and just throughout life in general. Is the best way to grow the business, and especially in hockey, because I think hockey's the one that's the furthest behind, even though it's such a beautiful sport. In a lot of people's opinions, is the fact that you can sway the casual fans, and then you create hardcore fans from the casual fans. That's the big term, because in any sport, in any business entity, the hardcore fans and the ones that are there tried and true throughout, the good and the bad and the ugly and anything in between, those are the ones that are always going to be there. That's what you can count on. That's money in the bank. But how you grow the business is the casual fans that are sometimes only come in for the exciting moment. I think that over the years a lot of sports have done that. I think over the last couple of decades, with baseball was America's game, and then football kind of took it over in the past maybe like 3 or 4 decades, where football is kind of like America's sport now, and that's the one that everybody turns to, and then everybody has like Super Bowl parties even though they don't care about football, and that is the marquee sport. And then baseball is kind of like number 2, and basketball with they had some image issues, and they had some trials and tribulations throughout the years, and now they're kind of excelling with the new TV contract that they have, and all the top stars getting monopoly money at this point for salaries. And then you have hockey, where hockey doesn't exactly, it's not jumping off of the page when it comes to all the other sports. It's better than it was 20 years ago, but the casual fans and growing the fan base there, turning those casual fans and those sometimesy fans into the hardcore regular fans. That's where, and getting new fans into becoming more casual fans and just people that are like, I don't like hockey because they don't know anything about it. That's the best way to grow the business. And I think that, from going back to the baseball here, this was an epic moment for baseball itself, because it went back to its roots. It went back to the pastime. It went back to the great traditions and everything that baseball is supposed to be all about, which they kind of fog up now with the whole like 7-inning doubleheaders and the runner starting on second base and the overtime. Like those are things that go against the tradition, which I absolutely hate. And thankfully, even though I'm a Yankees fan, I'm happy with the way the game ended. I was, it was a theatrical moment. It was a great storyline from start to finish, and we didn't have any of that. We didn't have an overtime that would have consisted of a runner starting on second base, which was totally like against baseball. Was not anywhere near the 1989 movie. I would rather have the Yankees lost and have it play out the way it did than have that extra inning factor that would have been just completely trash. um, so next year's game. So in keeping up with the thought that this is going to be an every year thing, with the success of it, which was a slam dunk. I don't see. I think maybe one of the only issues was that there was only a limited amount of seating. It was really just kind of like behind home plate and a little bit up the third and first base lines. So as far as tickets go and things like that, I think it's always going to be kind of a mess when it comes to that game. But that's for people in that area, and any reason to go to Iowa should be a great reason. So because that's not exactly a very heavy touristy attraction place to go in and out of. But next year's game is going to have the Chicago Cubs versus the Cincinnati Reds, which is also bringing kind of the local team Chicago, and then having a Midwest team like the Cincinnati Reds. Going in there. I think it's going to be great for baseball, and as long as you were mentioning the hockey, how they kind of like overdid it a little bit, because they kind of had like there was that one year where they had like 3 or 4 outdoor games in the same year, and now they kind of like keeled it back to just having one again. As long as they don't overkill it, it'll be a special thing, and within the next 15 years, theoretically, they can get all 30 teams in and out of there. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, or if they just make this like the Winter Classic with the Blackhawks and Penguins always finding their kind of way in there. I don't know if they'll keep throwing Chicago teams and New York teams and big market teams in there, but it was for the moment and for what it was, and 2 traditional teams that have been around for over 100 years. It was a beautiful moment. I think you could see it in the players' faces too. You could see like as far as the game time was game time, but before the game it looked like everybody was kind of in awe, and then you see like the press release pictures, and after the game, and just it was I think it was a great moment that even in that particular time, whether they won or lost, years from now, they're going to look back and they're going to be like, man, that was a really cool game, especially for just being a regular season game. It was absolutely amazing. And one more prevailing thought I have as far as comparing it to the Winter Classic is, like there's been gripes about the Winter Classic being counted as a regular game because of some of the weather constraints and things like that kind of takes it away from the neutral zone of being indoors in a regular arena. But I think that's an issue that we don't have in baseball, because baseball is already outdoors, and the field was I guess it was kind of comparable to Yankee Stadium. It was kind of short between the lines, like around like at the foul pole area was around like 320 feet, and then the center field was around 400 feet, which is consistent with what the regular dimensions of your average baseball field would be. So I think it was fantastic, and it's something that should be easily replicated. Although if there is some kind of rain, I guess it would be kind of tough to like reschedule the game into there. But those are all challenges that are for another day. But this was an absolute win for Major League Baseball. All right. So we're going to move on to the wild pennant races that are going on within Major League Baseball. Now, everybody has around 40 games left to go in the season, and right now it is really, really getting hot, especially this past week. This past week there's been a lot of crazy developments. We're going to head over to the AL East first, where the Tampa Bay Rays have continued their almost season-long stranglehold on the American League East, which I think the American League East and the NL West are the 2 powerhouse divisions, and then everybody else is kind of just swimming in between. But we'll go in there. We'll talk about the Rays are sitting at 5 games up, 74 and 47, and the New York Yankees have had an absolute tear in the last 40 games. They've won 28 out of the last 40 games, and on July 18th they were behind the Boston Red Sox 9.5 games, and after this, these past couple of games where they ended up sweeping the Boston Red Sox, now they are sitting in second place, 5 games behind the division leading Rays, and they are 69 and 52. And the Boston Red Sox are 69 and 54, sitting 6 games back from the Rays and 1 game behind the Yankees. So what a difference a month can make. And the Toronto Blue Jays are probably the best fourth place team in baseball. Unfortunately, they are just in the Lumberjack division of the AL East. They are sitting at 63 and 56, 10 games back. Any thoughts on the Wild AL East over here?
Yeah, it reminds me of when you thought of the Atlantic Division in the NHL back in like 2012, where you just had the Flyers, the Devils, the Rangers, the Penguins, the Caps. It was just, or not the Caps, they were in Southeast Division, but you just had all these teams, and I think they had 5 teams that made the playoff that year. And then the division leader of the other 2 teams, and then a last wild card. And it's crazy, and that's what I think of when you see the AL East. I mean, can you have a better city to be in right now if you're a sports fan than Tampa? I mean, you have the Bucks, you have the Lightning, you have the Rays. Obviously, Miami has done pretty well the last few years, and so it's definitely just got to be an exciting time to be someone in Florida right now, and I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, that is true. I think they've they've taken the torch from Boston, which was holding it down for pretty much more than a decade of like the best sports town to be in, and Tampa Bay they dub it Champa Bay, which is a pretty clever spin on the term there. It's I think it's great, especially with the Rays, the way they operate. They lost Tyler Glasnow to a season-ending Tommy John surgery, and they ended up trading away Rich Hill. It seems like no matter what they do, they have this amazing pitching, and they have these amazing young players, and all they do is they make these trades and they lose players, but then they end up getting players back. I mean, I don't know if the past decade if they've had the same scouting teams, or I don't know what it is that exactly that they do, but whatever they do is just it just works. There's like they're not high names, they're not like people like when you think of like a Theo Epstein, like that's a name that most people know because he ended up like helping out the Cubs and the Red Sox first, and then the Cubs, they break their curse and everything. Like these are big names, but like the Tampa Bay Rays, they're just kind of like the no name, and they just step up. And no matter who's in the lineup, no matter who's coming up through, like they always seem to have like a young farm system coming up, and like they trade, they replenish, and they're just consistently good, and they have one of the smallest payrolls in baseball consistently, and they just take it to the higher priced teams, and it's amazing the way they operate, and that's one of the aspects of the Rays that I always tip my cap to, because they just win. Like they win, saving hundreds of millions of dollars, just not overspending on players that like other teams do. When they hit the free agent market. So, and then we'll talk about the locally, the New York Yankees. They're doing really well right now. They are kind of coming into their own, I guess, is the best way to put it. They're scoring with runners in scoring position. They're hitting a ton of homers, which is always the Yankees' medicine for offense and winning games. It's all coming together now. The pitching's going well, even though the bullpen is a bit shaky at times, but they're doing enough to win, and that's what's important. Going into this, I think the hard luck team in here is the hard luck team in here is I think it's both the Blue Jays and either the Red Sox or the Yankees, whoever ends up not making it to the finals. Like I mentioned in the show earlier, we had the COVID rules that were the 7-inning doubleheaders, where both doubleheader games would be 7 innings instead of 9 innings, and then we have runner starting on second base and all of the extra innings for each team. So it kind of gives them an advantage to kind of end the game a little faster. The one COVID rule that I think made the most sense was having 8 teams in the playoffs. And right now you have your 3 division winners, and then you're going to have the 2 best second place teams play one game to make it in as one of the 4 um, playoff teams. They'll go against the team that has the best record in the league. So it's 5 playoff teams against 8 playoff teams, and we're going down through this list, and you're gonna see that the unfortunate part about this is there's gonna be teams that deserve to make the playoffs, and they're not going to be able to get there because there's 3 less spots than there were last year. I hope that in future years, starting next season, in the off season, they'll talk about it hopefully, and then going into next season, there really should be 8 playoff teams in each league instead of 5. That's just my opinion there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You see this in like every different sport has a different number of teams that'll make the playoffs. I think historically hockey and basketball have always had the most with about 50% of the league, at times even more than 50% of the league making the playoffs. And then you have football and baseball, which is much more restrictive. I mean, I see benefits to both, right? On like the one hand, the more you expand, the better chance you're having for these underdog stories of getting more fans involved because their teams will have a chance. On the other hand, the playoffs are the playoffs, right? Like they're designed in a way to make sure that a team that should win the championship does win the championship. And it doesn't always mean the best team wins, but it makes it a higher percentage chance that the better teams win by having the regular season limit who gets to make the playoffs. Otherwise, if everyone can just make the playoffs, and you don't even need a regular season, just go into like a March Madness type format.
Absolutely, but let's take the AL in general. So we named 4 teams in the AL East. The AL Central, the White Sox are running away from it. They're 12 games ahead of the Cleveland Indians at this point. So they're just the one team that's going to represent from the playoffs. And then we have the AL West that has the Houston at 70-50. The Oakland A's are 68-53, 2.5 games away from Houston. Seattle 65-56, and the Angels are 61-61. So this is 9 teams that are at or above 500. So I think it hurts the playoff scenario hurts when it's somebody makes the playoffs when they have an under 500 record and they just kind of just scrape in, or they scrape in out of technicality, like the NL East was in football last year. I think what was it, the team made it was like 6-10 or 7-9, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think that in both leagues that there's strong cases where I think there should be more playoff teams, and then with more playoff teams you have more fan bases attracted to it, and then you have basically the ratings lasting longer when you have more teams that are in the playoffs and in the playoff hunt, and it goes down the wire toward the regular season. Right now, if you're an Angels fan, you could be looking at this like, all right, we're 10 games behind in the division, and we're 7.5 games behind the wild card. Like basically the season's pretty much almost done. Like there's the anything could happen scenario in the last 6 weeks where they can make it, but if it was a different scenario, then we're looking at, all right, well, let's say if there were the 8 playoff teams going in. So, like, the Angels, all of a sudden, they're, like, 3.5 games behind, and that's, 4-game swing. And, like, there would be more of an opportunity and more of a chance for them to be able to power into the playoffs other than the way it's currently constricted now, Just as an example, but just throwing it out there, I think that it should definitely be an 18 playoff. It's definitely better than 1995. Before 1995, there was only 2 teams that made the playoffs in each league, and then like there was the championship series, and then there was the World Series, and that was it. So like we were definitely better than we were back in those days. But like the sign of the times, that people want excitement, they want to grow the sport, and then you also want because a lot of times in baseball, aside from the Rays and sometimes the A's, there's the haves and the have-nots, and the ones that have are usually the ones that are always in playoff contention, always making the playoffs, and the have-nots are the ones that have to try to creatively scrape by and create these teams and get crafty with it to go over the money issue and try to have people overextend themselves on the contracts and things like that. I just think it just brings more money to the table, and it's just which helps everybody when you have more eyes on it and just more attraction to it. And then you get those casual fans in those cities, like let's say a Seattle or Oakland or Toronto. You can have a whole country behind Toronto because they're the only ones that are in there. That they're the only existing Canadian team. So there's really, if you look across Canada, whether they're the Eastern Canada, Central Canada, Western Canada, it seems like everybody's a Blue Jays fan because that is Canada's team. So I think that they would, I just think it would be beneficial for everybody just to have more opportunities for everybody. Then you have more of those, anything that could happen scenarios, and then you have those one of the things that makes hockey playoffs so exciting is that regularly you have underdogs winning the series. You have underdogs winning 4 out of 7 games, and it never gets old, but it's always like a thrilling aspect of it. Like one team looks completely built and has been great all year round, and then you have this other team that kind of scraped in and they had to dig deep, and they had they had trials and tribulations throughout the whole season, but they finished out strong, and then they end up overtaking the bigger teams. I think that it's always a great story every time, and I think that the more opportunities for that to happen would be better for everybody. All right, so we're looking at the wild card races here. So last week at this time, the Yankees were a bunch of games out of even the wild card race, even the playoffs at all, but now they are sitting in the first wild card spot, a game up on the Oakland A's and Boston Red Sox, while Seattle is 3 games back, Toronto is 4 games back, and the Los Angeles Angels are 7.5 games back. So out of the 6 teams mentioned, only 2 teams will be able to play against each other for the right to go into the playoffs. All right. So then we're going to head to the NL East, which locally the New York Mets, who have been in the lead throughout the whole season up until maybe 2 weeks ago, they are now slipping at the wrong time. The surging Atlanta Braves, who have won 9 out of the last 10 games, they are sitting at 65 and 56. And the Philadelphia Phillies, who have also had a strong second half of the season, are 61 and 59. They're 3.5 games back of Atlanta. And the New York Mets are 60 and 60, 4.5 games back of the division-leading Atlanta. The Mets just went through. They're going through the NL West, which is a very daunting task for any team. So what are your thoughts on the NL East and how the outlook can look for the New York Mets?
I think the Mets have a good chance to do pretty well, right? I mean, I think it's a very tight division, and the Mets have historically always been a team that, sometimes they, even in a season where they're doing good or a season they're doing bad, they'll just surprise you in some games and to make you think like, wow, this team's going places, and then the next game they could just be totally in shambles. So it really depends on what sort of Mets we see in the last 30, 40 games of the season, right? Are we going to see a .500 Mets like they're basically at now, or are we going to see the height of the Mets? And if we see the latter, I think their chances are actually pretty good. It's a pretty thin division.
Yeah, I think even if the Mets don't end up making it, which so basically the second place team in the NL East is 4.5 games or worse of the wild card. So the NL West is super strong, and the NL Central is actually coming on with the resurgent Reds. We'll get to that in a second. But basically, one team has to come out of the NL East, and that's going to be the only team that comes into the playoffs as far as it's currently constructed right now. So it's super important to win the division. I think that the New York Mets, even if they don't make the playoffs this season, I think they're still building towards greater days. And I think that unfortunately they have a very starving fan base who wants everything right now. Which is the typical New York way for any New York team. But they have the new ownership in place. They kind of this past off season they struck out with certain higher priced free agents, and but the owner in place, he's willing to spend money, and they're just basically they just need years ago when Pedro Martinez ended up signing with the New York Mets, and then that led to the whole kind of Dominican players Spanish infusion into the New York Mets, which actually took them all the way to a shot at the World Series all those years ago. So basically they need some players like that, which they do have. Francisco Lindor that they inquired from a trade. He's currently injured. Hopefully the sooner he gets back, the better it'll be for everybody. But with him and presuming that Javier Baez ends up staying because they have he has such a great relationship with Francisco Lindor from their World Baseball Classic days playing for Puerto Rico, and just if they can continue building on to this winning culture, and eventually it's going to turn around for them. Eventually they're going to be more attractive to those high priced free agents, and having different scouting and having people come in. I think that their future is bright, even if in the short term they're going through this little lull right now. And yes, they could turn it around. Certainly, 120 games, so they got 42 left. So there's certainly time in the season to turn it around. But I'm just saying, even if they do not make the playoffs this year, they are still I think this season is still considered a success moving forward, and that they will continue to build on what they're building right now. Then we have the NL Centrals. The Milwaukee Brewers are running away with the NL Central, but the Cincinnati Reds have really turned it up in the second half. They're making a case for a wild card spot, which it looked like the NL West that has the surprising San Francisco Giants at 78 and 43, 3 games up on the world champion Los Angeles Dodgers, and the San Diego Padres 12 games up on the San Diego Padres. So it looked like the Dodgers and the Padres were going to duke it out all season into the heading into the playoffs, much like they did last year. So now the San Francisco Giants, who ended up, they had a good amount of players sit out for COVID last year, so they ended up bottoming out. But they are, bar none, the surprise of the Major League Baseball this year. They are crashing the Dodgers and Padres party, and they're now, so they made that a 3-team race, which it looked like it would solidify the NL wild card would be 2 NL West teams, and the division leading team would already be in the playoffs. But now the Cincinnati Reds are only 1.5 games behind the San Diego Padres, so they are really looking like primed and ready to go. And with the Cincinnati Reds, with the resurgent year of Joey Votto, who's having an NL MVP campaign, and it's just it's been a really, really wild race. And even up, from this point last week, it's been totally different. It looked like the Mets weren't in that bad of a shape, and the Braves were still coming on. So the Braves have won 9 in the last 10 games. The Los Angeles Dodgers have won 10 out of the last 9 out of the last 10 games, and everybody's just those two teams are clicking on all cylinders and going back to where they were last year, heading to the top of the standings. So, any thoughts on the NL West races?
The NL West is just the division kind of similar like we were talking about the AL East. It's just such a powerhouse division. You have the Dodgers and the Giants are always going to make it for an exciting run. Personally, I'm always rooting for the Dodgers. I have a friend who's a really big Dodgers fan. So between that and the fact that I feel like they're the Washington Capitals of baseball, especially now that Kershaw and them have finally won, I'm really hoping the Dodgers pull it through.
Yeah, I think over the years the Dodgers have been kind of like a lovable loser kind of team, and then they ended up reaching the pinnacle last year, which was fantastic. But then they ended up doing it in the most non-ideal year to win a championship, So I think it would be more special now. I mean, if they can go like the two-peat the same way Tampa did for the NHL, I think that would probably be the most ideal. Because how awesome was it that the Tampa Bay Lightning, they end up winning the Stanley Cup in the bubble. It's not as exciting. There's not as many fans in there. It's not the same kind of euphoric moment. And then they end up doing it again, running it back, and then they end up, enjoying the euphoric moment with the fans and everything else like that. So it would definitely, I think, be more special if the Dodgers were able to win it this year. But last year, they basically ran away with it in the 60-game season, and then bulldozed through the playoffs pretty good there. But I mean, this year it looks like there's much more parity between everybody, and there were more teams that were involved, for the trade deadline. More teams reloaded and revamped, and like now we have 9 teams going for 5 spots, and it's super exciting going through the wire here and seeing who's going to be in and who's going to be out in the last 5-6 weeks or so. All right, so we're going to move on to one of the teams that we lightly mentioned. So the Cleveland Indians, it was announced a couple weeks ago that they're going to change their name to the Cleveland Guardians. What are your thoughts on that change there?
Look, I mean, at least they're ahead of the Washington football team in terms of picking a name. I think the Guardians are a good name. It's synergized well. You have the Cavaliers, you have Guardians. It's a very similar theme. I guess the Browns are kind of left out of that, but I understand why they felt the need to change the name, and I think that whenever you're making a big decision like that, that's trying to be more respectful to your audience and to just fans and future fans in general. I think that's something that should be rewarded and recognized.
I think my prevailing thought about it was I didn't really find the harm in having like the Indians and the Redskins and things like that. I think especially for the younger generation, I think it kind of reminded everybody of the Indians and how like the indigenous people existed more, because they a long time ago they were very prominent, and then now it seems to be dwindling a bit, with all the past history and things like that were unfortunate cases. But now I think I think it was a great part of history to have them as sports names and things like that. There was a lot of people that disagree with it, and then they end up changing the name after about 100. I mean, the Indians have been around for about 80 years or so. So it's pretty crazy that they choose now to change the name. But it's still the Cleveland Indians, and they're still going to be the Cleveland Indians tomorrow, and they're still going out there with the Indians logo and stuff. It's kind of just, I think those are it's like the two radical differences, and very weird how that's all going. Where the Chicago Blackhawks were just like, nope, we're gonna stay who we are, and that's it. And then there's that aspect of it. All right, so going back to the NHL. So the NHL announced this week that they're going to be adding advertisements on the hockey sweaters starting this upcoming season. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, I don't think there's anyone in the world who wants to have advertisements on jerseys, right? I mean, hockey has been notorious when you look outside of the NHL, like you look at the European leagues, that they're almost like NASCAR. It's just like logo, 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 logo. But I mean, this is sort of the reality, right? Would I prefer that that jerseys come with advertisements on them, and instead the league will sort of have less seats in the arena so they can make the ice bigger and make it more Olympic sized. I would trade that for a day, like in a heartbeat. Obviously that trade's not an option. We're just getting logos no matter what. But I think in the grand scheme of things, like yes, I don't think anyone's thrilled that they're going to be there. But I think it's just the reality we have right now, especially in the COVID world, and with the cap not going up, the league needs revenues.
Absolutely. This is, I think it's directly a cause of all the lost revenue that happened, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. Now, so to go back to your original point, there are a lot of national teams out there, both hockey and other different sports, that have just tons of logos. It seems like hockey was doing it more, towards the boards and trying to incorporate it into the ice in different areas and things like that. But now, I've gotten to the point where it's hitting the jerseys. And then the NBA started this past season. They had the one advertisement on the jerseys themselves, and that seemed to go well. So the hockey's kind of just following suit in that regard. I think I think it kind of from a sports fan perspective and a fan that likes to have jerseys and such like that, I think it kind of hurts a little bit. But this past season, I ended up getting 2 Knicks jerseys that were just like the basic Fanatic ones, and they didn't come with the advertisements. So it might just be
yeah, I don't think the private jerseys come with them. I think it's just on the players.
Yeah, and it's just I think for if you want to have the mint authentic jersey and spend $250 or so on a jersey, then it'll come on it, and that'll be how it goes. But I don't think it's really gonna affect the more average fans that either have a jersey already or they get the cheaper ones. Heading into that, I think I think it's important to grow the game any way possible, and I don't think it's not anything that's going to take away from the actual product on the ice, I think. And then they did have the helmet selection on the they had the arenas on the helmets this past season, and it didn't seem to I don't think it really affected too much from a viewer standpoint. So I think most hardcore fans will find it a little annoying, but at the same time, it's not exactly the end of the world there. I think anything that helps the game and helps the sport move forward is great in itself. And it won't. No, I remember a couple years ago when I was going to WNBA games. I went to a couple one year, and then I wanted to get the jersey, but it was the advertisements on the jersey were bigger than the actual team logo itself. They were about 3 logos on each jersey. I think it was the Liberty had the DraftKings on their jersey, and it was just a big DraftKings logo with a little number on it, and then the rest of the jersey, it was just, that wasn't attractive at all. And I think that as long as they're not having the logos as big as or bigger than the actual team name or team logos themselves, then we're all straight. All right, so we have the one of the impactful things that happened last week was Owen Powers going back to Michigan. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was funny actually. I got a text from one of my good friends today, who was saying, when was the last time a first overall pick didn't play the next season in the NHL? And I was thinking back, I was honestly, I think it was Eric Johnson, but I would have to double check. And it was, in fact, Eric Johnson about 15 years ago, 2006. He ended up getting drafted by the Blues and then went to Minnesota for a year. And so this is the first time in 15 years we'll have the first overall draft pick not playing in the NHL. And you know what? I actually think that's probably the best case scenario for Buffalo fans and for Owen himself, right? I think, you've seen the history of Buffalo getting, these really prime marquee potential defensemen and just having no way of developing them, right? If you have Nashville as the example of a franchise that knows how to develop the best defensemen, Buffalo's on the complete opposite of that. I mean, they had Tyler Myers. He won the Calder. he was had that really famous shootout goal his rookie year, and you're like, wow, this guy's like, 6'10" and or 6'7", whatever, 6'7", 6'10", something like that, and can just play really well, and then you just never learn to adapt to the NHL game and how to use his size. Obviously we talked about Rasmus Ristolainen, now Flyer. He was another guy the Sabres were high on. He started off great, and then you sort of trailed. And then you have Rasmus Dahlin, super young, not saying his career is over, but you look at some of the other defensemen who broke into the league really young, like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, and I guess Adam Fox has a few years on Dahlin, but that was sort of the expectation, and he just hasn't been there yet. And so I think Owen taking more time to develop is great for him and making sure that he's going to have a great career. And I think it's better for the Sabres, right? I mean, the Sabres are officially in a rebuilding mode. They just shipped off Reinhart. They're probably shipping off Eichel. I mean, Eichel doesn't want to play there anymore. He's made it very clear. And so if they do ship off both Eichel and Reinhart, they have no way of competing. And so they need to not burn Owen's ELC years, and they really need him to be a star marquee player. In the event Eichel does, remain a Sabre, if he undergoes surgery and he doesn't play this year, the Sabres are in a really good chance to get another top pick, and then they can start sort of expediting the rebuild. So I think this is a win-win scenario. Obviously, the biggest fear is going to be, will Owen hold out, right? Is he going to play for 3 years in college and then say, you know what, I'm not going to sign with the Sabres? That would be, I think, very detrimental to the league for me. I think if that happens, there will be a very big change to the college rule.
I agree. I think that it was it's been rough seeing the past couple of years. I mean, that's how Adam Fox ended up getting to the Rangers, because, what was it? He wouldn't sign with Carolina, and then he got traded to Calgary. No, he wouldn't sign with Calgary, and then he got traded to Carolina, and then he got traded to the New York Rangers. That's the way they got Kevin Hayes, too, because Kevin Hayes wouldn't sign with the Blackhawks. So he ended up becoming a free agent and then coming over to the Rangers. I think the rule needs to be looked at in general, and if Owen Power does end up doing what Kevin Hayes and Adam Fox and a lot of other players have done before him, then it would definitely be a super black eye to not only the Sabres but the league in general. Going back to your point, I think it's very, very fair to say that he's better off going back to college to continue his development, because I think especially the past couple of years, you've had like a Jack Hughes come in and look like he's like super overmatched and not not worthy of a first round pick, even though as he develops into his man body and moves forward, it seems like he would definitely the book hasn't been written to make that proclamation yet, but you have Jack Hughes, and then you had Capo Caco, who looked just as overmatched and didn't seem like he really would fit in the NHL system. And then last year you had Alex Lafreniere, who didn't have like a super spectacular season. There were exceptions to these rules where you had an Austin Matthews and a Connor McDavid, but those are not going to happen every year. And I think that the fact that the first and second round picks have to start automatically in the NHL is not the best course of action for all of them. It might work for some of them, but not for all of them. And I think in the situation where as Buffalo is currently constructed, it's definitely not the best learning environment for somebody to learn and grow, because then you have different situations. Like if you look at like in football, I always remember David Carr from the Houston Texans. He was the first overall pick there, and then he just got sacked like a ridiculous amount of times, and really I think that hurt his career, where if he would have went to some other successful or even half successful team, he would have been able to excel more and maybe have a more illustrious career because he was put in a better situation. And in this situation, it's definitely better that Owen doesn't get into the NHL, and then basically if he's the only target, then everybody's gunning for him to shut him down, and he's not going to be able to learn and flourish while he's growing into his man body heading into the rest of his career.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm very high on Jack Hughes this year. I think he's going to have a really big year. I mean, he played really well last year. He definitely grew for a player who doesn't have any marquee wingers on his team, being a 19, 20-year-old center and putting up 31 points in 56 games is absolutely huge. And, to put that in perspective, that would have had him fifth on the Islanders, who is a team that made it all the way to the conference finals. He had the same amount of points as players like Taylor Hall and Jordan Eberle, and that just goes to show that he low-key had a really, really big season that no one noticed. Philip Forsberg's another player who had about 31, 32 points. So I am really excited for Jack Hughes and really excited for the Devils this year.
No, don't get me wrong. I think Jack Hughes is a great player in itself, but I just think that the idea that these guys can almost have to skip the AHL and then head straight into the NHL. I don't think it works for everybody. I think that it should be there should be like a grooming period where they could spend a year down there or a year or two, depending on the development of the player. I don't think it should be an automatic for them to just jump into the NHL and then, be expected to be a 100-point player, from the first year moving forward. I think that, that the Austin Matthews and the Connor McDavids, they set that expectation for everybody to do that. But it's really, I don't think it's fair to every athlete who gets picked first and second to have that extra added pressure on top of being selected first and second overall, that they have to go into the NHL and they have to go into these buildings with, grown men and their grown men bodies and that are already used to the speed of the game and stuff like that, and then be able to replicate that right away from the jump. I don't think it's fair to the athletes. I think there should be, whether sometimes the players don't want to go down to the AHL, sometimes the NHL teams, they think that it's better off for them to be in the NHL than the AHL. I don't exactly know what the exact dynamics of them are, but I think that a good majority of these young players would benefit more being in the minor league system and going through that course and, kind of earning their way to the NHL, as opposed to just going there day one and being expected to perform at high levels. And then when they don't, it just adds more pressure, and it just, it kind of makes like a snowball effect going down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most marquee example probably in recent years is Jonathan Huberdeau, right? Third overall pick, 2011. He did not play his first season. He went back to juniors, had a great season, actually, amazing season. And then next year came to the NHL and won the Calder, and now is one of arguably at least the easily top three left wingers in the NHL. Some might even say he's the best, right? And so that was, one example of a team that did take their time with, a top 5 pick, and you just don't see that much anymore.
Absolutely. All right, so that does it for our show for this week. Thank you very much, Rowdy Jard, for stopping by again.
Sure, man.
All right, and we will be back next week. My name is Alfonso Caldero. It's LDM Radio Sports Talk.
Good luck.